Hello. For my final reflection, I wanted to highlight Albert Bandura and social learning theory. The reason that I think that this one stood out the most to me is because it's one that I see the most often when working with children. Um, it's something that is also utilized a lot with the kids that I work with in special education. So just to kind of identify what the key idea of his social learning theory is that children don't learn just from trial and error, but they also learn especially through observational learning. And so defining that, this is from How Social Learning Theory Works, an article from Kendra Cherry on Very Well Mind. Quote, social learning theory centers on three key ideas. People acquire knowledge through observing others. Internal mental states affect this learning process, and not all learning results in behavioral change. So that's kind of a more of a concrete definition of what social learning theory is, but seeing it in practice, a really good example of this to start with that I read about in the readings was how he discovered the social learning theory through the Bobo doll study. So in this, Albert Bandura took videos of adults playing with a doll calmly and kindly, and another video where they were playing with it violently and aggressively. And in this study, there were two groups of children. One group saw the video where the doll was played with nicely, and when given the opportunity to play with the doll, they also played with the doll nicely. Now, for the other group, they watched a video of the doll being played with aggressively and violently, and when given the opportunity to play with the same doll, they also played with it in the same manner. So another quote that I have connecting to this study was from Albert Bandura's biography, an article on Very Well Mind by Kendra Cherry. Quote, Bandura termed this phenomenon observational learning and characterized the elements of effective observation learning as attention, retention, reciprocation, and motivation. So from that quote, we kind of understand more about how do we effectively use this new theory about social learning. And one of those ways in the classrooms is that I've seen is through Kagan strategies of peer collaboration. This is just one example of how it can be used. But in this, students are often asked to model their thinking, model behavior, model something for other students to learn from, and then they switch off, and this is how they learn more from each other. Another great example of using this in the classroom that I will be using in the future, and I also currently use, is when we highlight behaviors that certain students have. So I like how Sarah is sitting nicely in her seat, or that was a very kind way to ask your friend to share, or things like that, where we explicitly state what another student is doing so that other students in the classroom are able to observe this behavior and learn from it without us directly telling them, you need to sit in your seat. We need to use kind words. Another way that this can be used in the classroom through modeling is by teacher modeling. So when, for example, if I were to make a mistake, the way that I react to making that mistake is modeling for children how they should react when they make a mistake. So it's another way for us to indirectly teach students about something. Lastly, I wanted to dive into what I wonder about this theory. So I kind of want to jump back to the first quote that I used from How Social Learning Theory Works, just the last part where not all learning results in behavioral change. So even though not all learning results in behavioral change, we live in a day where children are very exposed to things on media, on the internet. They have access to TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all sorts of things, endless amounts of TV shows and movies. So they are taking in many more forms of modeling, positive or negative, than ever before. And one thing that I wonder about is if they are learning more online than they are from real human-to-human interaction. And if that is the case, how do we adjust that? How do we regain their focus for observing things that are in the real life, the real classroom, and their peers, rather than the things that they watch online?